Prey is the newest prequel to the original Predator movie, movie that the internet seems to be going crazy about right now. It's a Hulu original, and I believe Disney Plus original if you're outside of the US. It takes place long before the first movie with Arnold. It goes all the way back to the Native Americans when they're discovering the Predator. And I have to say, it was pretty cool to see what it would be like to have Native Americans with their weapons and knowledge of the woods fight a alien that is super technologically advanced, hundreds of years ahead of them. That was pretty cool. We've got some bad Predator movies, and I have to say, this is one of the better ones. So right off the bat, the premise itself is actually really reminiscent to the first movie, starring Arnold, in the sense that it's just a main character and then a group going out, getting hunted one by this creature. Not the same as the first film, which I really love, but a similar premise, and I can see why people really like that return to form. We also have a main character who is really not perfect and isn't amazing at fighting. She gets beat up a lot, makes a lot of mistakes, and it really humanizes her, which adds to her likability as a character and relatability, and just overall made it really believable, even though she was good at other things. Some of the action-packed scenes were also really intense with the Predator and the way they portrayed it. I definitely was entertained at certain parts, but it's not a perfect film. I have a ton of issues with it. To start, they got it right in the sense, with Die Hard, where you have a character that is not perfect, which makes it a lot more interesting. But at the same time, it seemed like she had the answers for everything. She knew everything. She basically figured it out in the first 20 minutes of the movie, I think. You have all these other characters, basically every guy in the entire tribe who seems like they haven't lived in the woods their whole life. It's almost like they know nothing and she knows everything about tracking and hunting. It kind of took me out of the movie because I would imagine that they'd be pretty knowledgeable, even though I get the point they were trying to make is that she's a woman and they're not going to believe the things she says outright and they're never going to give her the benefit of the doubt. That makes sense to me. I get the point they're trying to make. I just think the way it was portrayed, it was like everyone's a complete idiot and they're just making tons of dumb decisions. And I hate movies that do that, especially horror movies when you have a group that's just dumb and makes a bunch of dumb decisions. I also felt like a lot of scenes were on the nose, especially in the first act. It felt like every scene was just driving home that same point that, no one trusts her, no one believes in her, she has to prove herself constantly. Like, okay, we get it. I kind of wish there was a little more depth to other characters because her character had depth in other moments, but it felt like no one else in any of the scenes, especially in the first act, had any personality or purpose other than driving that point home and creating that tension with our main character. And I also have to say, I feel like if people went to see this in theaters, they'd feel much differently about it. I think they'd walk out a little bit underwhelmed. Part of me feels like when a movie's on Hulu and Disney Plus and you can just log in and watch it without having to pay for it either, it kind of takes away, I think, from our expectations. And I really stand by that. I think if it was a movie theater only release and you had to go and watch it, I'm really curious to see what people would have thought. I don't think it's a bad film. I don't think people would hate it. I just think that it would be a little bit more realistic about the reviews. I just think people are just loving this movie, and I'm not. I really don't love it. I think a lot of the dialogue is one-dimensional. It's not one-dimensional and fun dialogue like in the first film where, it's not like it's deep or anything, but at least it's funny and there's a camaraderie amongst the whole team. It just feels like in this film, every conversation is that same purpose. That's the only reason they're talking. I also have to say that the way the film's shot, I don't really know how to explain it. This is maybe more of a me thing. It seemed like a bit glossy. I'm not sure how else to put it. It seems so digital. I don't know if it was the CGI. I'm not sure what it was. I'm not sure if it's budget limitations or what for the quality of CGI, but there was something about the movie that took me right out of it. I recently, after I watched Prey, went back and watched the first film with Arnold, and I have to say, I prefer that CGI for some reason. It just felt a little more visceral. This movie felt so digital. And I don't know, there's something about it that just really took me out of it, especially when you're trying to portray, Native Americans. If you've ever seen the film Apocalypto, it reminded me of that in some ways, and it's just such a better film. It really builds suspense, and it kind of gave me perspective into Prey to show me how little suspense it built for me. I was more just enjoying some of the scenes with the Predator, and, they had a lot of blood, and it was, some epic action scenes, but still, glossy. I didn't love the CGI. and dialogue wasn't great. So I'm gonna have to take that unpopular opinion on this one, I guess, and not love this movie like everyone seems to. I just really didn't like it. So I'm gonna have to say, I mean, it's worth a watch because it's free, I guess, but I really do think that's part of why people are praising it so much. Anyway, that's about it. Thanks. And the last thing I have to say about Prey is Arnold is numero uno.